What schools could be attractive to the Mountain West?
Conference realignment is always in the news, but this week we got a hypothetical for you.
Hey, welcome back to the Mountain. I am JY. This is my good friend Steve. And as Steve said, we kind of have a fun hypothetical that I want to go over. We got a really cool comment from a subscriber, that college football guy. He has his own channel.
I like his channel.
And we posted something to his channel.
Yep.
As he's doing a lot of these kind of hypothetical what if type of things, kind of historically. What if the Pac and the Mountain West merged, or what if X, Y, and Z? But he actually posted a comment not too long ago, and it was about if the Pac were to take some existing Mountain West schools, 3, 4, I think he mentioned 4, to form some sort of a new Pac, who do you think could be potential candidates for the Mountain West to go after? And I'm gonna kind of spin that and say whether it's because they lose some schools to a Pac, or they just want to look at expansion. They want to go from 12 to 14 or 16. What schools maybe does the Mountain West, could they maybe have interest in here, Steve? And, we're going to break it down into 2 groups. I've got an FCS group.
Okay.
And I have, of course, a FBS or a G5 group. So, yes, the G5 group would be stealing from existing conferences. I don't ever like to talk about that because too many people like to talk about stealing from the Mountain West. But that's what we're going to do in this hypothetical. We're going to look at any potential FCS schools moving up, and then maybe some group of 5 schools that maybe would be of interest to the Mountain West. Before we get into this, I'm going to do 5 of each, and then I'll give my final reactions at the very, very end. Hold everybody in suspense because I got to lay out what I'm actually thinking here. But I looked over this, and I really tried to get into some detail. This isn't just me like, oh, who do I think is going to work? I wanted to look at some data, and here are the things that I looked at. Let's lay this out. So number 1 clearly has to be geography. Has to be geography. We have been talking here on the Big Mountain about a premier Western Conference. We like to think that, if the existing Mountain West and Oregon State and Washington State join together, and however that may be, that is a absolutely phenomenal base, or even the premier West side of the country conference. All right. Yeah, you got your onesie twosies that are in the Big 10 or a couple in the Big 12. Okay, fine. But that would be your premier Western conference. And so, of course, geography for me is number 1. I had to start with geography. Anybody on the eastern side of the U.S., not even an issue.
So if they're not in Pacific or Mountain time zone.
Yeah, I didn't look at time zones. I'm probably on the verge there. I'm probably on the verge, and we'll get into that here in a minute. The next thing I looked at was land-grant universities, because actually the Mountain West, they have quite a lot of land-grant universities. Wyoming, Utah State, Colorado State, Hawaii, and Nevada are all land-grant universities. And lo and behold, if the Beavs and the Cougs were to come on, they're both land-grant as well. Did I say land-grant? Did I say something else?
No, that's right, land-grant.
Land-grant. Okay. So that I looked at that, took that into consideration. Next one was enrollment, both existing enrollment and also if they're seeing enrollment growths. So most of the ones I'm going to talk about do have solid enrollment, but they're also having growing enrollment. I looked at a football success fan base and what their stadium looks like, right? So, how successful are they in football? We're a football podcast. That's what we're mainly going to be talking about here. But how successful have they been in football? How active is their fan base? Are they filling the stadium? You're going to hear me talk about attendance numbers here with a lot of these. And also, how cool is their stadium? Yeah. All right? Because there's some really neat stadiums in the Mountain West and in these other schools that aren't in the Mountain West that I'd love to have them join. I'm going to look at this realignment attractiveness score. Really, this is ESPN's SP Plus score where they average in all kinds of good stuff. So I took that into account. I did actually look at basketball a little bit, just the fan base, how the teams do, because that is the other revenue-producing sport to some degree. So I did give that a little bit of flavor. And, of course, the last one, Steve, just my opinion and my bias. Because there's got to be some opinion and bias into this sucker. So let's start with the FCS schools. Do you have anything before I jump into them?
No, I like it. I like the criteria. Let's roll.
And I'm going to go in these by alphabetical. Okay. So I'm going to lay them out, and then I'm going to go one by one. And please jump into any one of these that you'd like to talk about. So the 5 FCS schools that I have picked to see if they maybe could be a fit into the Mountain West, alphabetically: Idaho, Montana, Montana State, South Dakota State, North Dakota State. Probably not a surprise at all to anyone, but those were the 5 that I looked at. I do want to remind everybody now that the amount to jump from FCS to FBS level is now $5 million per school, as well as going over and meeting some other requirements. I'm going to get to those requirements here in a little bit.
So you're saying they have to pay that amount to
they
the
have to
NCAA?
pay that amount to the NCAA. It used to be $5,000.
Yeah, that's...
Which was a drop in the bucket,
Yes,
clearly.
yeah.
$5 million to an FCS or smaller group of 5, that's not a drop in the bucket anymore.
Big chunk of change, yeah.
So let's talk about Idaho, a land-grant university. Most of these FCS schools are going to be land-grant university. Idaho is. Their average attendance this past year was 11,700. They had about a 73% capacity rate. That would really be lowest, in the Mountain West. They're with Hawaii. Towards the bottom in terms of average attendance. That's not a knock on their fans. I'm sure they have rabid fans. I know they have rabid fans, but just overall, in terms of who, butts in the seats, probably towards the lower end of the Mountain West here. Their enrollment's just under 10,000, so they're 9,400, so not a huge school. And for basketball, they have just been in the bottom of the Big Sky for a while.
They're this is the Vandals, right?
The Vandals, yes. The Idaho Vandals, yeah.
They're the ones with the red turf.
I have absolutely no idea.
I believe so. I believe
they
they're
red?
Red turf.
They got to counter the blue, right?
Yes.
So they're
yes.
red and blue.
Sure
All right.
Red turf, and I believe I'm not 100% sure. Our Idaho fans out there, our Vandal fans can. I believe Mark Schlereth, the famous Denver Bronco offensive lineman, played was an Idaho Vandal, I think. I'm pretty sure.
Well, Idaho, the school there, and I didn't write down the name of the town. I apologize. Very, very close to Washington State University. Yeah. Very, very close to Washington. Hear me talk about that here in a little bit. Let's go to number 2 here, Montana. Their average attendance, so this is not a land grant. Of the 5, this is the only non-land grant universities that I'm going to talk about in FCS. 2023 average attendance, 26,300, 104% capacity. They're selling this sucker out and making you stand to watch
Standing
the Grizzlies.
room only, all right.
And I love their name, the Grizzlies. It doesn't get much better. Montana Grizzlies, I love it. That's on par with a Colorado State and an Air Force. So up there in that 3 to 4, certainly the top half of the Mountain West. Very, very solid attendance there. Their enrollment's around 10,400 for the school. And their basketball, they're a top 5 in the conference. I look back over several years, 3-4 years, just to get a gauge of where these teams have been at. So solid basketball school as well, at least recently. And again, if I was biased, I really like the Grizzlies. I like the name. The stadium is beautiful. Massive mountain in the background, snow-capped, all that kind of stuff. Exactly what you think of with a Mountain West school. I really like Montana here. Let's get to the next one, Montana State. That is the land-grant university in the state of Montana. Their average attendance, 21,600, a capacity of 121%. So they must be standing on the poles of the lights, the light poles. But again, that's on par with Utah State and Wyoming. Exactly what you're looking for from a Mountain West school here. Their enrollment is 16,900, and this past fall I saw was the largest fall enrollment in that university's history. So a growing university in Montana there.
And from what I understand, the state of Montana has been growing. There's a lot of people moving there. It started with tourism, and now people are like, wow, this is beautiful. Let me move out there. So
yep. I don't know if the locals necessarily like that, but
locals never do. That's just how it goes.
I don't like people living beside me for crying out loud. So basketball, last 3 years they've been in the top 5. They actually won a regular season championship in terms of wins and losses. So again, they're right there where they need to be. I would guess. Again, just looked at football and basketball, but have a strong athletic presence there. Let's go to number 4 here. Not number, but the next one here. North Dakota State University. They, again, another land grant. Their average attendance, 15,100, about an 80% capacity, so very, very, very strong. On par with about the New Mexico, kind of towards the bottom when you're at that 15,000 average, somewhat near the bottom, but that's okay. You can't. Not everyone can be number 1 for Pete's sake. Their enrollment just under 12,000, and again, top 5 in terms of basketball. Another strong basketball school, and then South Dakota State, another land grant. I'm a broken record.
Yes.
I'll say repeating record. It's a broken record, dummy. Land Grant University, the Jackrabbits. Average attendance 18,200, and that's about a 94% capacity, on par with Nevada. They're about ninth-ish, 8th or 9th out of the conference, so not bad. Their enrollment 11,500. Fantastic basketball the last couple years. Top 5 regulars. 2 of the past 3 years, they're regular season champions. We just got done watching the wrestling finals, and there were some jackrabbits hopping all over the mat for crying out loud.
Every year they got guys in the wrestling.
So again, a very, very strong, I think, athletic program there in South Dakota State. Now, I will say, from the geography standpoint, that both of those Dakota schools are on the eastern side of their state, so
closer to Minnesota.
Definitely starting to push towards the east with those two schools. It did stand out a little bit, especially when you're talking Fresno along or San Jose State, kind of closer to the coast in there. So that they're getting out there. The Montana schools just right in that belt of the Mountain West there. So anything with those 5, Steve, before I go to our FBS friends?
I mean, I think all 5 of those are quality targets if they're ready to move up to FBS.
Yep.
The first 3, the Montana schools and Idaho, fit right in that regionality that we've talked about many times. I think they would fit into the culture of the Mountain West. And North Dakota State and South Dakota State, they probably would fit as well. Like you said, they're a little farther over. Yeah. I don't know if they quite fit into that culture or not, but if they were looking for a home, they wanted to move up to FBS,
right.
I think Mountain West would be a good landing spot for them. And I do remember, so the Vandals of Idaho, they traveled out to Penn State, out to Happy Valley a few years back.
Yes.
So they're willing to travel. They're willing to go and play anybody. I mean, to go and come and play Penn State on the road, night game. I mean, that's not easy to come across all the way across the country. So they're willing to go and play anybody. So yeah, I mean, I like all of those targets.
Well, and the Montana schools are on the western side, which is what you would want out of that large of a state, right there with the Idaho Vandals, right there with Washington State. I mean, that northern, if you want to call it a northern division, they're all very, very close right there.
Those first 3 you said, I think, make total sense, and I imagine, I mean, this is just a guess, just following. I mean, I follow the FCS playoffs a little bit and the basketball. That Montana and Montana State, if they were going to make that move, they may want to do it together. It makes a lot of sense. And again, and the other 2, the Dakotas. Yeah, they're. I wouldn't say no.
Right, exactly. Well, more to come on them.
Okay,
and I'll give you my recommendations. But let's jump into the 5 FBS schools that I have kind of looked at here. You're going to see an obvious similarity with most of these. One of them, I'm going to start with the one that I've talked about before. I know I got some groans from commenters about this school, but I'm going to bring them up again because I just think it does fit into certainly the geography of the Mountain West, and that's New Mexico State. The Aggies, way down there to the south. They're in Conference USA, a conference that I think could get you could get some teams willing to move potentially out of. They are the Land Grant University in New Mexico. Their average attendance was 14,500, but their enrollment here is 11,500, and it's actually decreasing. They have a decreasing enrollment. In terms of their attendance, it's on par with New Mexico. Apparently, everybody in New Mexico, they're kind of lukewarm about athletic sports, maybe. Yeah. I don't know. Especially, I mean, we know the Lobos have struggled recently, and until recently, the Aggies had struggled for quite a while.
Yes.
They've caught fire here for the last couple seasons. In terms of their realignment attractiveness score, you didn't hear that with the FCS because there is no score for FCS schools. But going to hear me talk about that with the FBS schools. Very, very weak. One of the weakest of all the FBS schools. So that definitely, takes a step back and be like, is that who you really want? But their basketball brings solid crowds. And again, from the geographical standpoint, from the land grant side of things, kind of a new location right there in the southern tier. There's some things there that I think could be of interest to a Mountain West.
That's the first one I'm going to jump in and poo-poo a little bit.
You can poo-poo everybody.
It took me a while to come around on New Mexico, as you know. But the main reason to do this, I think, would be to pair them up for New Mexico, be a pairing, because they're so far kind of down there by themselves. But other than that, I don't know if I see a lot of benefit. I'll be interested to hear your recommendations, because I don't know if there's a lot of things going for them.
Well, you say pair them up.
Yeah.
I will get to that here shortly.
All right.
So now I get on the Texas rule. All next four are all in the state of Texas. I think it makes sense for the Mountain West to try to get into the state of Texas. So let's go over these four. As soon as I say that, everybody probably knows the four I'm going to be talking about. But we're going to, again, alphabetical order. We're going to start with Rice. In the AAC, the AAC is right there as the top G5. I would argue it's the Mountain West and the AAC is being at the top. I think the Sun Belt's just a step below those two. And just overall, I know some people would say the Mountain West is number one. I know some people say the AAC is number one. I'm not going to argue that right now. But I do think taking a school from the ACC is probably the hardest to do for any other Group of 5 conference. But anyway, Rice has an average attendance of 20,500, right there with Wyoming, Utah State, so fit in perfectly in terms of their attendance in football games. Their enrollment is only 8,000 because they are a private school, so very, very different than any other school I'm going to be talking about here. And we'll get into whether I think that's a pro or a con with them. And then their realignment attractiveness, at least out of the ones I'm looking at, was 2 out of this Group of 5. They were up there in terms of a school to look at for realignment. Now, I want to just say this realignment attractiveness, I don't think is necessarily talking Group 5 to Group 5. It's Group 5 to something else. I don't want to say it's not even Power 4 anymore, but moving up in the world, upwards, so to speak, not a lateral movement. Yeah. So you got to take that with a grain of salt. Anything there with Rice, Steve? The Owls, who I've bet on a couple times this past year.
I think for me, my biggest drawback, and I'm interested to see what you say, is the being a private school. I feel like the trend with athletics, the public, the flagship, and land grant universities just have. They have an advantage as far as their enrollment going forward, their support, their public support. So that would be a caution for me, being a private school.
Yeah.
And I believe all of these Texas schools are all going to be Central Time Zone. So that would be a big move for the Mountain West. They would really have to decide, do we want to do this and go into that Central Time Zone?
All except maybe one. I did not look at time zones. Okay. I did not. So maybe somebody can help me. Most of them, yes, but there's one I'm going to get to that I'm not sure. So the next one, a team that I have followed, and that's not why they're on here, but one that I was trying to get some schools out of Texas. So Texas State out of the Sun Belt. 2023 average attendance, 21,200. Again, right there with Utah State and Wyoming, very similar to Rice. Their enrollment, 38,000, so a much larger institution. And again, their realignment attractiveness scored near the bottom, but you're comparing these schools kind of at the bottom to schools at the bottom. So you got to take that for what it's worth. But they really stuck out to me, certainly a little further east again. Now if you look, about the same distance away, just going south, as the Dakota schools would be, just, Texas to the south and the Dakotas to the north. And so, what are you thinking about Texas State?
I'm assuming they're a land grant as well.
They are not.
Oh,
no, they
are
not.
Oh, wow. Okay.
They are not.
So, I like the enrollment. I'm guessing, are they some other kind of public university, like a non?
Yes, I believe they are. Well, yes, I believe they are, but they're not a land grant university.
Okay, I know
they're not the Texas land grant.
The charts I've seen, they have the flagship universities, the land grant universities, and they have this other.
I think it's
other public universities.
Yes, I believe that's the Texas State situation.
I mean, I like it as far as the size of the enrollments. And just being in Texas. Now, again, the Mountain West, they need to determine, do they want to make a play into Texas?
Right.
If they do, I think this would be an attractive school, a big school. Texas is just growing and growing and growing.
Yep.
This is a school that has had some momentum on the field the last couple of years, has done some good things. I mean, I know, these smaller schools, once they have a couple good years, they get their coaches poached or whatever, and we'll see what happens. But I think I can see some positives there.
So let me get to the next one, and this would be the parlay on to New Mexico State.
Okay.
That is UTEP, literally right across the border from each other in El Paso there. So they are a Conference USA school again. 2023 average attendance 18,200, puts them there around Nevada, but that's fine. Enrollment here 24,000, so solid size school. And again, their alignment is near the bottom. Their attractiveness is somewhat near the bottom. The thing I like about UTEP, and I think I mentioned them before as well on a episode long ago. And again, people kind of pooed that, but you're getting into that same territory where New Mexico State is. You're into Texas. I mean, barely, but you're there. Completely different population base, different exposure down in there. Is it far enough into Texas to really get the Texas crowd? I don't know, but hey, it's the closest you're going to get to the Mountain West, for crying out loud. So they were really interesting to me back then. They still are. I think it could be a great play, and being in Conference USA, maybe there's a little bit to be had there. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, UTEP has been historically just kind of a solid kind of tier 2 program.
Yeah.
They have a long history. They've had their ups and downs. If I'm not mistaken, they're in part of the same University of Texas system as the main, Austin campus and other various ones.
Yeah.
So to me, there's a positive there. If that area, I will say, is interesting. That El Paso area, we're also, not only is it on the border of New Mexico, only on the border of Mexico.
right.
The fence goes through town.
Yes, for sure.
I think Juarez is on the other side.
Something like that.
So that can have its positives and its negatives. It's kind of far away from everything.
Yeah.
But I mean, it really does have that solid Hispanic population. If you were trying to grow, a Hispanic fan base in that part of Texas. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah.
I think there's some positives there. The geography is interesting, but I do think there's some positives.
Agreed, and that's why they're on the list.
Okay.
Let's go to the last one. I had a UTEP. Now we're going to go to UTSA. So University of Texas San Antonio, again within that same University of Texas realm. This is another AAC school, so another stretch, I think, for me. But I didn't go for for now, I didn't go, who can they actually get? I'm going to get to that at the end. It was who's in again, meeting those criteria that I laid out, and UTSA absolutely does. Their 23 attendance, average attendance was almost 29,000. Their enrollment's 35,000. And they've got one of the highest, or they were the highest attractiveness score of the 5 that I was looking at here. Did I maybe stretch a little bit with UTSA? Yeah, I'm going to say I probably did, but I still think they could fit the bill. They certainly have, again, the attractiveness, the enrollment, the attendance, everything's there. You're getting further to the east at this point, which, again, it's a question of how far does the Mountain West really want to go. But I think if you get the right school, and I would think UTSA would be that school, maybe they'd be willing to do it.
Yeah, I'll tell you, out of the 4 Texas schools, to me, UTSA, clear number 1 if you could get them. I think it'd be a great pairing with Texas State, either them or with UTEP. Either way, if you're only taking 2, I think that they would be a great pairing. I like their potential. Public schools in Texas growing population. So for me, I'd have UTSA my number 1 target out of there, right there. I still like Texas State though.
Okay, so I'm going to take 2 from each. Okay. I've laid out 10 schools, 5 and 5. I'm going to take 2 from each, and I'm going to give you an honorable mention.
Okay.
As well, if it's 1 and 3, this would maybe be the 3, at least for the one side. So, who comes in 5th with the FCS schools? To me, this isn't that close. I think the 5th of the 5 that I laid out is clearly Idaho. Of the other 4, clearly above what Idaho would bring. I also kind of question, would Boise or I'm going to include Washington State. I'm going to nudge them into the Mountain West. Would they even be interested in Idaho, who's literally across the border there? Who knows? But even irregardless of that, I think the other 4 are clearly better targets than what the Vandals would be here for the Mountain West. So let's get to them then. I got 2 from Montana and 2 from the Dakotas. I'm going to go 1 and 1. I'm going to split it up. So I struggled here a little bit with Montana because I like both of these schools. I really, 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 really do. But on the outside, I'm going to put Montana.
Okay.
The Grizzlies. I love it. I love their stadium. But I'm going to go with the larger land-grant university. They have that upward enrollment projection, this being Montana State. Honestly, you just can't go wrong with either of these. I mean, it's a either or. It frankly doesn't matter. I had to pick one, so I gave the slight edge to the Bobcats, again, mainly because of enrollment and enrollment growth and them being a land-grant university. Geography's a wash. Doesn't really matter. They're both really strong academic and athletically. So I just went with the land-grant school here. You can't go wrong with that.
Makes sense.
So that's the school out of Montana's. So the Dakotas. Again, I really, really struggled with these. I think either one would be fantastic. It's very, very close. And I take whichever one's interested.
Yeah.
Montana or Montana State or both, or North Dakota, South Dakota State, or both. Hey, I'd take them all for Pete's sake, but we're trying to limit it to 4 schools. So I'm only going to go 2. I am going to go with the Jackrabbits. Maybe just because they have a little bit more name recognition in all of the sports, I think, overall. Just coming out of the wrestling thing, you saw how well they did there. So that could be a little bit of bias for me. But I'm going to give the slight edge to them here. But again, either one completely fantastic ad if you're willing to go that far east.
Yeah.
And if not, just take both the Montanas. I think it's a win-win there. So what are you thinking?
Yeah, I get your reasoning. I like your choices. I think for me, especially if we're in the scenario that the questioner posed to you, where the Mountain West lost some schools,
right?
I say, for me, if both of the Montana schools wanted to come in, I'd just start there, take both of them, and then if one of them wasn't ready or whatever, or somebody vetoed one of them, then I'd look at the Dakota schools. But for me, I think I would just go right at both of those Montana schools. Both of them have had some pretty darn good success with football.
They go at each other in football, for Pete's sake.
The regionality, they're just perfect for that. Mm-hmm. So for me, I think I'd go for those 2. And then I'd probably put my eyes, and I know you're going to get to them next, on maybe two of the southwestern schools.
That's right. Well, let me talk about Montana schools really quick, because I actually came across, as I was researching this, an article from, it was either summer or fall of last year. I believe it was late summer when the pack was starting to blow up, or was blowing up. And there was some interviews done with both the ADs of Montana and Montana State, and it came up, about, hey, are you looking to move? Things could be changing. Things that they would have to do to get there. So I talked about the $5 million that they would have to pay. They also would have to up their total scholarship allotments from where they are right now. They would need to add another sport to get to 16, likely a women's sport, I guess. I didn't look at them, but I would assume some sort of a women's sport. And certainly, last but not least here is their annual operating budget. They're both in the low to mid 20s right now. There was talk about getting them into the upper 30s, if not 40. So definitely it would be a dramatic increase from the university to say, yes, we're going to take this step in order to do this with our athletics. And maybe they're there. The quote that came from one of the ADs was, "We aren't looking, but we are watching."
Okay.
So, kind of an interesting quote, I thought.
Which really, to me, makes a lot of sense for, I think it sounds to me like they would keep an eye on the Mountain West. Let's see what happens with the pack. Do they form into a big unit, or do things get split up?
Yep.
So, to me, and if they knew they had a landing spot in the Mountain West, especially, we'll see what the next TV contract looks like for the Mountain West. I think it would make sense. If not, if they don't have a landing spot, I think it sounds tough for them.
Yep. All right. Well, let's get to the other group, the FBS group, where I'm poaching people.
Okay.
So as I said, UTEP and New Mexico State are neighbors. You mentioned maybe it's a pair deal. For me, I would just go after one or the other. I'm not going to take them both, because if you do want to move into Texas further, then go after one of those and get the heck east into Texas further. So let's start with either UTEP or New Mexico State. Both, as I said, are Conference USA schools. New Mexico State is a land-grant school, which, again, I know we put a lot into that. But I'm going with UTEP. They're in Texas. They have a very solid enrollment. As I said, New Mexico State enrollment's actually decreasing right now, at least, and maybe that's planned. I don't know. But of these two schools, for me, it's really not close. I'd be going UTEP here, Steve.
Yeah, I agree with you. If you're making that choice, to me, I don't see really any value added with New Mexico State. And I'm not trying to make any New Mexico State people mad,
Right.
but New Mexico, the state is just not a huge college football market. You've already got one school in there who has struggled on the field a bit, who maybe isn't drawing a huge fan base. I just don't see much value in New Mexico State. And for me, if you're looking to get in that region of the country, then it makes so much more sense to get into Texas.
I totally agree. So let's get into Texas a little further.
Okay.
So now I've got Rice, Texas State, and UTSA. I'm only going to take one of them, and I'm gonna make two picks. But I'm going to tell you why I'm making two picks. I'm going to make the pick that would be amazing if you can get them, but then I'm going to make the realistic pick. So the amazing if you can get them is UTSA.
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to get them. I don't think there's going to be interest again in leaving the AAC here. But if you can, that would be my pick. But my realistic pick then is Texas State. I think they fit the bill. That's in the Sun Belt. Could you maybe get them out of the Sun Belt? Maybe. And that's a heavy maybe for any Sun Belt fans. We're doing this for fun. I'm not saying we're poaching Texas State. Yeah. But if I had to pick out of a realistic situation here, I'm going to go Texas State out of the Sun Belt. Strong Texas school, highest enrollment of the bunch. Certainly, again, about as far east as you're going to want to go with those kind of Dakota schools up north. So that's where I'm at. I'm going to go UTEP and Texas State are the two I'm taking.
Yeah, I definitely like that. And for me, the play for the Mountain West, if you decide you want to get into Texas, is I would give UTEP and UTSA the double invite at the same time. So we're inviting both of you.
Yeah.
We want both of you. And if you strike out with UTSA, I like your plan for going Texas State.
Well, I like the double invite for Montana State, and UTEP and UTSA. Get them up top, get them down low.
Exactly.
That would be amazing. And I know that wasn't my realistic top four, but here's my realistic top four. Again, I wanted to split them up 2 and 2, so it's Montana State and South Dakota State, along with UTEP and Texas State. My honorable mention, if you will, the next up would be Montana.
Yeah.
All right. So I got Montana State, UTEP, South Dakota State, Texas State, and Montana. And I'd put Montana honestly above Texas State. It's just, unless they really want to get into that market for some reason, Montana makes more sense. But I wanted to do 2 and 2. That's where I'm at. What do you think of my 4, Steve?
Yeah, I'm with you. I like those. I think if like I said, if I was the commissioner of the Mountain West, I would go with the double Montanas and those 2 University of Texas system schools. I get where you're going on South Dakota State.
Yeah.
And I think we're in pretty much agreement on those Texas schools. It's just whether or not you can pull out of there. But I will say, I think that if they decide they want to go into Texas, I think it's very important to try and get 2 out of Texas.
That's a good point.
I just think for those schools, you can say, hey, you can still, because that's going to be a daunting for schools in Texas to be considering playing, Colorado State and Wyoming and San Jose State and Fresno State and all these other schools. At least you can say, hey, there's another school here in Texas. It's kind of a natural rivalry for you. Mm-hmm. We really want to get into Texas solidly, so we want both of you together.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, hey, we want to hear from you, especially that college football guy. Did a whole episode on this because of your comment, which I loved, and that's why we did a whole episode. This was fun. We got to do more of these hypotheticals, Steve. I think they're a lot of fun, and as I said, he's doing a whole bunch of them right now, the what-ifs type of stuff, which is a lot of fun. So check him out if you can. Thank you to that college football guy for giving, I can't even say it, that college football guy for giving us this idea. Again, comment below. What do you like? What don't you like? What did we get? What did we get wrong? And here's where I'm at, Steve. We leave the 12. We add the 2 packs. We add these other 4. We're an 18 West Coast Premier League. That's where we're at right now. Not West Coast. Western Premier
half
football.
Of the country,
Yes. So, hey, with that, make sure you give this one a like. Subscribe if you like our content. We got all kinds of fun stuff happening here on the Big Mountain. We'll see you next time on the Big Mountain.